Good evening. I want to welcome everybody to tonight's presentation on funding and program design. My name is Michael Randolph, and I'm with the Center for Nonprofit and Community Development. We offer an array of different professional workshops on nonprofit and for-profit business development. Let's get the legal stuff out the way first. Any part of this presentation that is reproduced without our permission could land you with a lawsuit. So what's the state of nonprofits from 25 to 26? 50% of nonprofits within this 25 to 26 period of time would have or will close up. 19 plus thousand jobs were lost since January the 20th of 25. This number has tripled at the end of December of 2025. 43.5% of nonprofits operate with no staff. Let's talk about the economic impact. Let's start with the lost jobs. In May, there was almost 4,000 jobs lost, and that's May of 2025. Inflationary pressures include a shrinking of private giving. Funding declines. In the first quarter of 2025, 5 to 10% organization saw a decline in their major donors' contributions. That number has gone up since then. What is our mission? Our mission is to empower organizations driving meaningful community change while fostering growth. Well, what are our core specializations? Well, the first is program development. Designing programs aligned with community needs and sustainability. Neighborhood planning. Advancing inclusive, resident-driven revitalization, especially in disenfranchised and marginalized communities. Social entrepreneurship. Build earned income strategies for financial independency. And finally, best practices, developing scalable approaches that elevate nonprofits' standards. What funders are looking for, and we're going to learn a little more about what funders are looking for. But one thing funders are looking for is your model a best practice model, or does it have the potential of becoming a best practice model? So let's talk about some impact or highlights. So we've actually provided training to nonprofits, individuals, businesses, government agencies, and others in over 37 states. Again, we provide an array of different training. Over 500 plus organizations received our services that include providing all of the paperwork necessary for them to become a 501c3 organization. On a national basis, we have community initiatives supporting housing, workforce development, economic development, health models, and other areas of specialty. So let's start with a definition of a nonprofit. The legal definition is a legal entity designed to advance the public good. The core missions include the core missions of these types of nonprofits typically falls within charities, education, science, religion, and literature. The financial model is is revenue is reinvested into programs to maximize community input. Let's talk about the three stages of a nonprofit. The three stages of our nonprofit development. Well, stage one has to do with the emergent stage. That includes establishing legal structure, defining missions and values, and initial initial programs. Stage two, which is the immediate stage, includes strengthening HR system, formally formalizing internal policies, and improving program evaluation. Later, we're going to talk about some approaches to program evaluation. And then finally, at the advanced stage, scaling program geographically, diversifying funding sources, and enhancing financial systems. So let's talk about the different types of grants, primarily. The first is unrestricted. This includes general operating support with flexible use. Restricted grants. These are specific project grants with measurable outcomes. Let me note that there are very few grants that are unrestricted. Most grants are restricted grants. The other type of grant is called capital grants, funding for facilities, renovations, and major equipment. And then finally, matching grants. Funds released once required matching dollars are secure. For example, you might go for a grant for 100,000, and the funder would say, "We'll give you 80,000, but you have to come up with the remaining 20,000." Let's talk about the different types of grantors. You have your individual, like you and I. The majority of funding comes from individuals. Then you have foundations, corporations, and government. Let's talk about the grant research tools one can use to increase your funding capacity. Start with the core platforms. This is like grant.gov, SAMS.gov, and the Foundation Center. Now, the Foundation Center has changed its name, but the Foundation Center offers one of the most comprehensive grant search mechanisms that's around. And then you have AI and smart research. This includes utilizing AI granting matching and predictive analysts tools. And then finally, you have your specialized database. This includes instruments, GrantStation, and Grant Forward. I use GrantStation a lot because it's cheaper, but Grant Foundation Center offers the most comprehensive grant mechanism out there. So, what do funders consider? What do when they want to fund an individual? First question they ask is, what is your sustainable financial model? How is your organization different than another nonprofit? What hard and soft data support your position of the need and the problem? What are measurable tools? We're going to talk about some of those tools later on in the presentation. The other thing is, what is the reason why you're starting your nonprofit? Next is, what's your value? And then the next is, are you networking, partnership, or collaborate with anybody. And then accounting practice. Here's what's important. Runners are looking for plausible, feasible, sustainable, sellable and fundable programs and projects. The problem statement. Well, the problem statement defines the need behind the proposal and the conditions you aim to change. Keep in mind that without a clear statement, there is no funding. So, what are some of the requirements uh, related to the statement of the problem or the problem statement? First, it has to be evidence based. It has to be supported by expert insights. It's backed by data, and it describes the need in human terms. Research methodology. So, how do we gather the data necessary to support the statement of the problem? There are two research tools that we can use. The first is qualitative research. This focuses on words, experience, and why people think or have a certain way or behave in a certain way. You gather information from interviews, focus groups, and narrative analysts. And then you have quantitative research. Quantitative research focuses on numbers, measurable data, and how much and how often. You can gather information using surveys or statistical analysts. Let's talk about the program design. Explain the program design in terms of its purpose. Explain how the project will be carried out and why the approach is effective. Keep in mind, when we're talking about this section, we're talking about how you plan to map out your program over 12 months, what you plan to do the first 30, 60, 90, on up to a year. The components should be clear descriptions of interventions, staffing structure, and milestones. Alignment. It must integrate community input and maintain cultural relevancy. Let's talk about evaluation. If you cannot prove it, they will not fund it. Your evaluation talks about what success looks like. Here is the framework. It demonstrates its programs achieve outcomes and support accountability. Let's look at the different stages before we go into the different methods of evaluation. So the stages of evaluation includes input, activities, outputs, outcomes, and impacts. The first type of evaluation is called a outcome-based evaluation or a logic model. As you can see, it starts off with what are your goals? And then it breaks down the process down. It starts with your process objective or the what you plan to do. It then moves to your activities or the how you're going to do it. It then moves to responsible parties or the who. Next, it explains the outcome or the why. And then after that, it talks about your indicators and your measurements. In other words, your evidence that you plan to show. Next, it talks about your data source. And in other words, where is the source of data? And then finally, it talks about the timeline or the when. The next evaluation part, the evaluation is called a process-based evaluation, or in other words, a theory of changes. And it breaks it down into three categories. First, it begins to address the question of what is the community problem and what is the need. And then it goes to the specific intervention that you plan to bring about in order to bring the change. And finally, it talks about your intended outcome. A process-based evaluation based on understanding how a program works and how it produces results. And then finally, your goal-based evaluation. What is it? An approach that examines how well a program is achieving its predefined goals and objectives. The focus is on measuring progress against what the program set out to accomplish. What are the core components? First is your goals and your objective, the intended impact and measurable outcomes. Next is the process and activities. What the program does to reach its goals? And next is the evaluation, ongoing assessment of implementation and result. And finally, it comes to outcome, the final change or benefit you plan to produce. How does it work? Evaluation compares planned goals with actual outcomes using data from activities and process to determine effectiveness and guide improvement. Every organization should have a 5-year plan. And this is part of the things we talked about in the 3 stages of a nonprofit. Let's talk about what does that 5-year strategic plan look like. First, it's environmental scan. By that means we say community needs, SWOT analysts, and external trends. Next, the priorities, the 3 to 5 long-term goals that you want to accomplish, and then your strategic objective. The next part is operations. And operation has to do with your SMART objective, your staffing systems, and your KPI. And then finally, your governances, your risk mitigation, and your board development. Now, let's talk about a SWOT analyst. And it breaks it into 4 different columns. First, we talk about your strength. And that we talk about internal areas where you excel or have unique resources. Then we look at your weaknesses, areas needing improvement or where resources are limited. Next, we talk about your opportunities. That is positive external openings or trends that you can leverage. And then finally, we talk about your threats. And in your threats, we talk about your external conditions or competitive pressures that may hinder your progress. For example, other groups are doing the same thing to you or money being cut. Now let's talk about social entrepreneurship, your social entrepreneurship plan. First, let's start with definition. Your plan should focus on generating earned income while pursuing core social impact, independence, revenue support, mission-driven activities, and reduce reliance on single funding sources. And finally, strategy. Blend charitable contributions, earned income, and public subsidies as an effective way of being sustainable. Then next is your project budget. And your project budget breaks into two different categories. First is your direct costs. That has to do with salaries and wages, consulting and contractors, equipment and supplies, programs, and specific expenses. Then comes your indirect costs, operational overhead, accounting and administrative, facilities and utilities, all are calculated as a percentage. Now, things are changing. The language is changing. Let's talk about the old language and then the shift in new language. There was a time you would say at-risk population. Now the term to use is historically excluded communities. There was a time when you would say underserved. Now you say documented disparities. There was a time when you would say disadvantage. Now you say strength-based framing. And finally, there was a time when you were talking about deficit framing. Now you're talking about resident voice center. AI. Let's talk about AI and how you use it to leverage your funding. So the first thing you can use AI for is fundraising. You can use for predictive analytic, analytics to identify donor patterns and behaviors. Communication. You can craft personalized messages to increase engagement. Task automation. That is data entry, scheduling, and volunteer coordination. The next, data insight. Analyzing program data or trend, trend forecasting. And the next, con- contact generation. That is AI assisting grant writing and social media marketing. And then finally, program delivery. We're talking about, unlike the past, you'll be able to have your office open 24 hours a day because the chat bots will serve as the staff to address any problem or any need that person might have. Board development and best practices. It's critical that you have uh, a meet the requirements that funders look for when they thinking about funding an organization. And board development is one of those things. The first thing they're looking at is diverse expertise. Now, keep in mind that what I'm about to talk about normally is a mature organization. If you're just starting, or if you are if you're a mom and pop type of organization, funders might not require all this related to your board. This is only when you really get into the big money. The first thing they're looking at is your diverse expertise. That is, recruit members with various, very, very skills: legal, finance, marketing, and community connection. Clear role. Define expectation, term limits, and responsibilities and board governance policies. Regular training. Provide ongoing education on nonprofit law, fiduciary duties, and strategic planning. And then finally, engagement. Foster active participation through committee work, fundraising, and advocacy efforts. Now, let's talk about the effective strategies you can use in terms of fundraising strategy. The first is donor culturation. That is, build relationship through personalized communication and stewardship. Next is multi-channel appeals. Use email, social media, events, and direct mail to for a broader reach. And then next, monthly giving programs. Establish recurrent donor programs for stable, predictable revenue. And then finally, grant diversification. Apply to multi-grant sources to reduce dependency on a single grant. Volunteer management essential. First, recruitment. Use social media, community events, and volunteer platforms to attract diverse talent. Let me pause for a second. Because as you go for funders, they also want to see, are you or do you have volunteers? Volunteers come to do free work. So they want to know, are there anybody that's committed to what you're doing? So after recruitment, the second thing is onboarding. That is provide orientation, training, and clear role expectation from day one. And then finally, recognition. Celebrate contributions through awards, social recognition, and appreciation events. Risk management framework. This is very, very important because they want to know how are you handling the money. Let's start with physical controls. Implement a dual signature, regular audits, and segregation of duties. Legal compliance. Maintain insurance coverage, annual filing, and employment law aheads. Crisis plan. Develop consistency plans for funding loss, leadership transition, and emergencies. Community engagement strategy. A lot of organizations fail because they fail to bring in the right community themselves to get some feedback for them. So, what are some things you do in terms of your community engagement strategy? Well, it starts off with need assessment. Conduct survey, focus groups, and interviews to understand community priorities. Partnership. Collaborate with local organizations, schools, and businesses for higher impact. Inclusive planning. Ensure diverse voices, especially marginalized groups. Shape and let them shape the program design. Feedback loops. Curate ongoing channels for community input and program improvement. Marketing and communication. If nobody know you exist, then your program doesn't work. So let's talk about this component. Let's start with digital strategy. First, web site optimization, social media presence, email campaign, and conducting marketing strategy, brand development, consistent messaging, virtual identity, storytelling approach, and impact reporting. Financial sustainability model, starting with earned income, fee for services, social enterprise ventures, and consulting. Endowment building. Long-term investment funds provide sustainable annual distribution. And finally, plan giving, bequests, charitable trusts, and legacy donation program. Try to implement all of this into your sustainability as you grow. Measurement, management, and impact management. Measurement, I'm sorry, data management, excuse me, data management and impact measurements. This is so important because this goes to show how you're going to show that you can prove what you're doing. The first thing you're going to do is to talk about your data collection. And how are you collecting the data? For example, client intake forms, program participation tracking, or outcome surveys. Next is your analytical tools, using your CRM systems, your data visualization, and impact dashboards. And finally, your report, your funders reports, your annual impact statement, and your community updates. Partnerships, we talked about it earlier. Strategic alignment. Identify organizations with complementary missions and shared value. Memorandum of understanding. Formalize partnership with clear roles, expectations, and outcomes. Selective impact. Join coalitions and networks working towards common community goals. Advocacy and public policy. Let's start with policy research. Understand current legislation affecting your mission and your clients. Grassroots mobilization. Engage community members in advocacy campaigns and petitions. Coalition building. Partner with other organizations to amplify policy influence. And finally, direct engagement. Meet with elected officials and testify at public hearings. So I hope this class has been of some help to you. We also provide our more in-depth class for those of you that wants to become professional grant writers. This is a structured 10-week training program covering government, foundation, and corporate grants and other types of grants. So feel free to contact us. Now, at this point, we're gonna go move to the other part of the workshop, which I want to learn a little bit about you and what you do.